1 week passed since the attack on Station Verth. 9 Una spent the first 3 days in the medical bay. While the doctors repaired her wounds, she had suffered 12 cuts and 3 deep punctures and a fractured rib from being thrown into the container. The Valkyrie medical staff told her that any other species would have collapsed long before the fight ended. Una just shrugged and asked when she could return to duty. The answer was not yet, but she spent her recovery time reading reports and watching news feeds. The incident had attracted attention far beyond the station racks. Raiders attacking a Galactic Coalition outpost was serious enough, but the story of a single human defeating 8 of them with a knife had spread across the network like wildfire. Some species did not believe it was true. The Vrax Confederation issued an official statement calling the reports exaggerated propaganda. They claimed their raiders had been ambushed by a full security team with restored weapons. No one who saw the footage believed them. Station security had recovered video from emergency cameras throughout the cargo bay and corridors. The footage showed everything in grainy red-tinted detail. It showed Una killing the first raider before he could react. It showed her hunting the others through the container maze. It showed her fighting the leader despite her wounds and refusing to stop until he surrendered. The video had been classified by Coalition intelligence, but pieces of it had leaked onto public channels. Una became famous without wanting to be. On the 4th day, she received a summons to appear before the Galactic Coalition Security Council. The council met in a grand chamber on the station's administrative level. Representatives from dozens of species sat in elevated seats arranged in a semicircle. Their eyes followed Una as she walked to the center podium. Commander Thresk stood nearby as her commanding officer Sergeant Kirith was there as well, looking uncomfortable in his formal uniform. The council chairman was a Velthari elder named High Arbiter Kasithi. Studied Una with ancient yellow eyes that had seen centuries of galactic politics. Security Specialist Una Park, he said, you have been summoned to provide testimony regarding the incident in Cargo Bay 17C. I understand, Una replied. We have reviewed the available evidence and heard statements from your commanding officer and fellow team members. Cassith paused. We have also received a formal protest from the Vrax Confederation. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Una kept her expression neutral. The Vrax demand that humans be restricted from combat roles within Coalition forces, Cassith continued. They claim that your species is, quote, dangerously unstable and unsuited for civilized military operations, unquote. With respect, High Arbiter, Una said, the Vrax attacked a Coalition station with the intent to massacre unarmed prisoners. We are aware of their crimes, Cassith replied. They will face justice through proper channels. However, their protest raises questions about human capabilities that this council must address. He pressed the control, and the footage from the cargo bay appeared on screens throughout the chamber. The assembled representatives watched in silence as Una killed 7 Vrax raiders. Some of them flinched at the violence. Others leaned forward with fascination when the footage ended. Cassith spoke again. Your current classification in Coalition military records is developing species with limited combat role. He looked at the other council members. Several representatives have proposed a change to this classification. A Morvani delegate rose from her seat. I move that humans be reclassified as apex threat with full combat authorization, she said. The evidence supports this designation. The Vrax representative surged to his feet. This is outrageous, he shouted. Humans are primitive newcomers who rely on barbaric weapons and uncivilized tactics. They should be banned from military service entirely. Your raiders used an EMP to disable all technology, Una said calmly. They chose to fight with blades and claws specifically to terrorize their victims. They called themselves apex predators and mocked my knife as a primitive weapon. She met the Vrax representative's eyes. They were wrong. You murdered them, he snarled. I defended myself, and my team against armed attackers who stated their intent to kill us slowly. Yuna's voice remained steady. If that is murder, then every Vrax raid in history has been murder. The chamber erupted in argument species. Representatives shouted at each other while the chairman called for Aura. Yuna stood quietly in the center of the chaos and waited. Eventually, Cassith restored silence. This council will vote on the proposed reclassification. He announced, all in favor of designating humans as apex threat with full combat authorization. Hands and claws and tentacles rose throughout the chamber. Yuna counted them without moving her head. The vote was not even close. The motion passes. Cassith declared, humans are hereby reclassified effective immediately. He looked at Yuna. Specialist Park, you have demonstrated capabilities that this council did not expect from your species. I did what any human would do, sir, Yuna replied. That is precisely what concerns some of us, Cassith said, but there was something like respect in his voice. The session ended and Yuna left the chamber with Thresk and Kirith beside her. They walked in silence until they reached a quiet corridor. Kirith stopped and turned to face Yuna. I mocked your knife, he said. I called you primitive and laughed at your backup weapon. He extended one of his forehands in the Morvani gesture of apology. I was wrong. Yuna looked at his hand and then at his face. You were, she agreed, but she took his hand anyway. I want to request a transfer, Kirith continued, to your permanent unit if Commander Thresk approves it. Thresk made a sound of surprise. You want to serve under a human? He asked. I want to serve with a predator, Kirith replied. A real one. He looked at Yuna. When that Vrax charged me in the cargo bay, I froze. My species evolved to hunt on our world, but I could not remember how. All I knew was weapons and tactics and technology. When the technology failed, I was helpless. He shook his massive head. I did not want to be helpless again. Yuna considered his words. I can teach you, she said, but it will not be easy, and you will not like the lessons. I do not need easy. Kirith said, I need effective. Thresk looked between them. I will approve the transfer, he said, on one condition. Name it. Kirith said, you train the entire unit in human combat methods. Thresk turned to Yuna, all of us including me. Yuna raised an eyebrow. You want to learn to fight with blades. I want to learn to fight without technology. Thresk corrected. I want to learn what makes humans dangerous when everything else is stripped away. Yuna thought about her grandfather in the mountains of Korea. He had taught her to track and hunt and survive with nothing but her hands and her mind. Those lessons had saved her life in the cargo bay. Maybe they could save others too. I will need equipment, she said, training weapons and protective gear and a space for practice. Done, Thresk said. And I want one more thing. What? Yuna smiled. Everyone on the team carries a backup blade from now on. Energy weapons are fine for most situations, but when everything fails, you need something that does not rely on power cells. Thresk nodded slowly. Agreed. They continued walking toward the security office. Yuna's wounds still ached, but they were healing. Soon she would be back on patrol with a team that respected her. Not because of her rank or her species classification, because she had proven herself when it mattered. She passed a young alien recruit in the corridor. He was Kalori like Delon, with gray skin and large black eyes. He stared at her with obvious fear. Excuse me, he said in a small voice. Are you the human from the cargo bay? I am, Yuna said. Is it true you killed 7 Vrax with a knife? It is. The recruit looked at the blade on her thigh. Why do you carry that instead of a bigger weapon? Yuna had answered this question many times now, but something about the young recruit made her want to give a real answer. Technology fails, she said. Circuits break and cells drain and weapons jam. But a blade only needs 2 things to work. What things? He asked. A steady hand and the will to use it. The recruit swallowed nervously. Do all humans think like that? Yuna remembered. Kirith asked the same question. No, she said. Some prefer axes. The recruit stared at her. Yuna smiled. Welcome to Station Vareth 9, she said. Watch your back and trust your instincts. The galaxy is not as civilized as it pretends to be. She walked away, leaving the young alien standing alone in the corridor. He watched her go with wide eyes. Then he looked down at his standard-issue energy pistol. For the first time in his life, he wondered if maybe he needed a backup weapon too. Yuna moved through the corridor outside the cargo bay with blood still dripping from her wounds. She had refused medical treatment and ignored Commander Thresk's orders to stand down. 2 Vrax raiders had escaped, and she would not let them reach the upper decks. They could take hostages or plant explosives or simply disappear into the station's population. Yuna could not allow any of those outcomes. The corridor was dark, and the emergency lights cast long red shadows across the metal walls. She followed the trail of blood drops and scuff marks on the floor. The raiders had been running in panic, and they had not been careful. Predators rarely learned to hide their tracks, because nothing ever hunted them. Humans were different. Humans had been both predator and prey throughout their history. They knew how to chase and how to hide and how to use fear as a weapon. Yuna moved in silence with her knife in one hand and a Vrax blade in the other. Her body ached from a dozen wounds, but she pushed. The pain aside, pain was just information, and the information told her she was still alive. The trail led down another corridor and then split at an intersection. One raider had gone left toward the maintenance tunnels. The other had gone right toward the cargo lifts. Yuna chose left. The maintenance tunnels were a maze of pipes and access hatches. A desperate Vrax could hide there for hours and ambush anyone who came looking. Better to deal with that threat. First, she entered the tunnel and immediately dropped into a crouch. The space was cramped and filled with the hum of machinery. Pipes ran along the ceiling and walls, carrying water and power and waste throughout the station. The red emergency lights barely penetrated this sphere. Yuna let her eyes adjust and then began moving forward. Every few meters, she stopped to listen. The Vrax were not built for stealth, and their scaled bodies scraped against metal when they moved. She heard him before she saw him. A faint scraping sound came from a side passage about 20 meters ahead. Yuna approached slowly with her weapons ready. The scraping stopped. He knew she was coming. Human, a voice called from the darkness. Yuna did not answer. I know you are there. The raider continued. I can smell your blood. Silence. Cannot kill me, he said. I am Vrax, and you are wounded prey. Yuna smiled in the darkness. Was talking because he was afraid predators did not need to convince their prey of anything. They simply attacked. She picked up a small piece of debris from the floor and threw it down a different passage. The metal clattered against the pipes and echoed through the tunnel. The raider burst from his hiding spot and charged toward the sound. Yuna stepped out behind him and drove her knife into his lower back. He screamed and twisted around with his claws, slashing at her face. She ducked under the attack and cut the tendons behind his knee. He fell, and she was on him before he could rise. Her blade found his throat, and the fight was over. 7 dead. Yuna cleaned her knife on his scales and turned back toward the intersection. 1 raider remained. She found the cargo lift at the end of a short corridor. Doors were closed, and the indicator showed the lift was moving toward the upper decks. The raider was trying to escape into the populated areas of the station. Yuna could not let that happen. She found a maintenance ladder next to the lift shaft and began climbing. Her wounded arms screamed in protest, but she ignored them. The ladder rose through the station deck by deck. Yuna climbed faster than she had ever climbed before. The lift was mechanical and slow. While she was desperate and determined, she reached the upper deck access hatch just as the lift arrived. Doors opened and the last Vrax raider stepped out. He found Yuna waiting for him. His eyes went wide with disbelief. How? He whispered. Humans do not stop. Yuna said. He turned to run, but there was nowhere to go. The corridor was a dead end, and Yuna stood between him and the only exit. Please, he said. The word sounded strange coming from a Vraxthir species considered begging to be the ultimate weakness. This raider had abandoned everything he believed to save his life. Your leader surrendered. Yuna said, "You can do the same. You will. Kill me anyway." "I will not," Yuna replied. "But if you run, I will chase you, and I will catch you, and I will not be merciful." The raider looked at her bloody form and believed every word. He dropped his weapon and raised his hands. 8 raiders had attacked. The patrol 6 were dead and 2 were captured. Yuna had done this alone with a knife and stolen weapons while her alien teammates watched in shock. Station security arrived minutes later. They found Yuna sitting against a wall with the Vrax prisoner bound beside her. The security officers were Kalori like Dellen, and they stared at the human with something between fear and awe. "Medical team is on the way," one of them said. "Commander Thresk and the others are in Cargo Bay 17C. Yuna replied, "They have another prisoner." "We know," the officer said. "They told us what happened." He paused and seemed to struggle with his next words. "They said you killed 6 Vrax raiders by yourself." 7, Yuna corrected. 1 was in the maintenance tunnels. The officer looked at her wounds and then at the bound prisoner. "How?" he asked. Aduna thought about the question. How did she explain the thing that lived inside every human? The ancient programming that activated when survival was at stake. The stubbornness that refused to accept defeat, even when defeat was certain. "We are human," she said finally. "We come from a world that tried to kill us every day for 1,000,000 years." She looked at her bloody hands. "We learned to kill it back." The medical team arrived and began treating her wounds. Yuna let them work while she stared at the ceiling and felt the adrenaline slowly drain from her body. She was exhausted and hurt and covered in the blood of her enemies. But she was alive. Her team was alive. The Vrax had learned a lesson they would never forget. Humans were not prey humans. We're not helpless without their technology. Humans were something far more dangerous. They were predators who had never forgotten how to hunt. Commander Thresk arrived. While the medics were finishing their work, he stood over Yuna and looked down at her with an expression she could not read. "You disobeyed my orders," he said. "Yes, sir," Yuna admitted. "You pursued armed hostiles alone while wounded." "Yes, sir." "You refused to wait for backup." "Yes, sir." Thresk was silent for a long moment. "You saved this station," he said finally. "And you saved my team." Yuna met his eyes. "I did my job, sir." Thresk made a sound that might have been a laugh. "No," he said. "You did something else entirely." He reached down and offered her his clawed hand. Yuna took it and let him pull her to her feet. "When you are recovered, I want to speak with you about a permanent position on my team." "I thought you wanted a veteran officer," Yuna said. "I did," Thresk replied. "And now I have one." He looked at the bound Vrax prisoner. "Though I admit the veteran is not quite what I expected." Yuna almost smiled. "Sir, I need to inform you of something." "What is that?" "I told you my knife was a backup weapon," she said. "I remember. I was wrong." Thresk tilted his head in the Veltary gesture of confusion. "It is not my backup," Yuna explained. "My energy pistol is the backup, and my knife is the primary. Everything else is just there in case the blade is not enough." Thresk stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed. "It was a strange sound coming from a Veltary humans," he said. "I do not think the galaxy is ready for your kind." Yuna looked at her knife still clutched in her hand. "No," she agreed. "But we are here anyway." The second Vrax died before he could raise his weapon. Yuna closed the distance between them in 3 quick steps and drove her knife into his throat. She used his falling body as a shield against the third raider who swung a hooked blade at her. Had the hook caught in dead flesh instead of living, and Yuna ducked under the corpse to slash at the raider's legs. He stumbled backward with a howl of pain, and she finished him with a thrust to the chest. 3 Vrax dead in less than 10 seconds. Remaining 5 raiders and their leaders stood frozen in shock. They had expected to slaughter helpless prey, and instead they were watching their packmates die. Commander Thresk stared at Yuna, with his yellow eyes wide and his mouth hanging open. He had never seen anything like this. Sergeant Kirath had fought in dozens of combat operations, but always with weapons and armor and tactical support. This was something different. This was raw violence delivered with precision and without hesitation. Yuna did not pause to let them recover. She grabbed a hooked blade from the third raider's hand and threw it at the nearest. Vrax, the weapon, tumbled through the air and struck him in the shoulder. It was not a killing blow, but it made him flinch, and that was enough. Yuna reached him before he could pull the hook free, and her knife opened his belly for dead. The Vrax leader screamed orders at his remaining raiders. "Kill her," he shouted. "She is one human with a knife." The 4 survivors rushed forward together. They had learned that attacking one at a time was death. Yuna could not fight 4 opponents at once. Even with her speed and ferocity, she knew this, and she did not try. Instead, she retreated into the maze of shipping containers, where numbers meant nothing. After her, the leader commanded. Raiders followed with their blades ready. The cargo bay became a hunting ground, but the roles were reversed. Yuna moved through the shadows between containers with silent steps. She had grown up in the mountains of Korea, where her grandfather taught her to track deer through the forest. Hunting was in her blood in a way these aliens could not understand. They, Vrax, were predators evolved on a world where they had no competition. They had never needed to be quiet or careful, because nothing on their planet could threaten them. But Earth was different. On Earth, everything was a threat, and humans learned to hunt by learning to hit. Yuna heard footsteps approaching from her left. She pressed herself against a container and waited. Vrax appeared around the corner with his weapon raised and his eyes scanning the darkness. He never saw her move. She came from behind, and her knife found the base of his skull. He dropped without a sound. 5 dead. Yuna took his weapon and kept moving. Somewhere behind her, she heard the leader cursing and demanding reports from his raiders. No one answered. She found the next one searching between 2 tall stacks of crates. He was nervous now, and his head kept turning to check his surroundings. Fear had replaced confidence in his movements. Yuna felt something inside her that she did not have words for. It was not pleasure exactly, but it was close. There was satisfaction in being the hunter instead of the hunted. The raider heard something and spun around. He saw nothing. Yuna dropped from the top of the container above him and drove her knife down into his collar. 6 dead. The last 2 raiders had stopped searching. They stood back to back near the center of the cargo bay with their weapons ready. The leader was with them, and his scarred face showed an emotion. Yuna had not expected to see fear, true, genuine fear. "What is she?" one of the raiders asked. "Shut up," the leader snapped. "She killed Vrax." The other said, "6 of us dead, and she is one human." I said, "Shut up." Yuna stepped out of the shadows and let them see her blood covered her hands and her face and her armor. Most of it was not hers. She looked like something from a nightmare, and she knew it. "You called yourself predators," she said. Her voice was calm and steady. "You said the other species had forgotten how to hunt." She began walking toward them. "You were right about them, but you were wrong about humans." The 2 raiders broke formation and ran. They fled toward the cargo bay doors without looking back. Their leader screamed at them to stop, but they ignored him. Survival instinct had overcome. Loyal Yuna let them go. She would deal with them later. Right now she had business with the leader. He stood alone with a massive serrated blade in his hands. His confidence was gone, but his pride remained. "You are wounded," he said while pointing at the cuts on her arms and the blood seeping through her armor. "So are you," Yuna replied. He looked down and saw the gash on his leg. He had not even felt her blade during the initial chaos. "You will bleed out before station security arrives," she continued. "Tell me why you attacked this station, and I will let the medics save you." The leader laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think I will surrender to prey? I'm not prey," Yuna said. I am the thing that makes prey afraid. He charged at her with a roar of rages. Blade swept down in an arc that would have split her in half. Yuna stepped inside his reach where the long weapon was useless. Her knife punched into his side once, twice, 3 times. He grabbed her with his free hand and threw her backward. She hit a container hard enough to dent the metal, but she did not stay down. She rose, with blood running from a cut on her forehead and her knife still in her grip. The leader looked at the wounds in his side and then at the human who refused to stop. "What are you?" he asked again. Yuna answered this time. "I am human," she said. "We do not stop." She attacked again, and he defended with desperate strength. They fought between the containers, trading cuts and blows. He was bigger and stronger, but she was faster, and she did not care about pain. Every wound she took seemed to make her more dangerous. Not less, the sight of her own blood awakened something primal in her mind. Her ancestors had hunted mammoths and saber-toothed tigers. They had survived ice ages and famines and wars that lasted generations. Giving up was not in her genetics. The leader stumbled as his injured leg gave out. Yuna was on him before he could recover. Her knife found his throat, and she held it there. "Yield," she commanded. He looked into her eyes and saw no mercy there, just cold calculation and the patience of a predator who had all the time in the world. "I yield," he whispered. Yuna did not trust him, so she drove her knee into his wounded leg. He collapsed and she kicked his weapon away. Then she stood over him and allowed herself one moment of exhaustion. The fight was not over. 2 raiders had escaped and station security was still dealing with the fire, but the leader was captured and 6 of his pack were dead. Commander Thresk emerged from behind a container with Kirith and Dellen behind him. They stared at Yuna like she was an alien species they had never encountered before. "The 2 who fled," Yuna said. "They went toward the secondary exit." Thresk nodded slowly. "Kirith, secure the prisoner," he ordered. Dellen tried to restore communications. He looked at Yuna. "Park, you should rest." "No," she said while picking up one of the fallen Vrak's weapons. "I am going hunting." The laughter echoed through the cargo bay like the sound of grinding metal. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once, bouncing off the shipping containers and filling the darkness with Manashe. Yuna dropped into a crouch and pressed her back against the nearest container. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the dim red glow of the emergency lights. She could see the shapes of her teammates scattered nearby, but nothing else. "Report," Thresk commanded. "Scanner is dead," Dellen said with fear in her voice. "All equipment is offline. My pistol has no power," Kirith growled. "The cell shows full charge, but the weapon will not fire." Yuna checked her own energy pistol and found the same problem. The trigger clicked uselessly when she pulled it. She had seen this before in training simulations. "EMP burst," she said. "They hit us with an electromagnetic pulse." "That is impossible," Thresk said. "Our weapons are shielded against such attacks." "Military weapons are shielded," Yuna replied. "Standard patrol equipment is not." More laughter rang out, and this time Yuna could tell there were multiple voices. The attackers were enjoying themselves. A new voice spoke from the darkness with a hissing quality that made Yuna's skin crawl. "Welcome, little patrol." The voice said, "We have been waiting for you." Lights flickered on throughout the cargo bay, but not the main overheads. Instead, dozens of small lamps attached to armor and weapons illuminated the figures emerging from behind the container. Sina counted 8 of them. They were Vraks, recognized the species from intelligence briefings during her training. The Vraks were raiders and pirates who considered themselves the apex predators of the galaxy. They stood nearly as tall as Thresk with lean, muscular bodies covered in dark red scales. Their faces were elongated with mouths full of serrated teeth designed for tearing flesh. Each one carried a weapon, but not energy pistols or plasma rifles. They held blades and hooks and serrated cutting Tools meant for close combat, the EMP had not been a defensive measure. It was a hunting tactic. The Vrax had disabled all technology so they could kill their prey the old-fashioned way. The leader stepped forward, and Una saw he was larger than the others, with scars covering his arms and face. A Velthari commander and a Morvani sergeant, he said while looking at Thresk and Kirith, both apex species from apex worlds who have forgotten what it means to hunt. He turned his yellow eyes toward Delin, a Kalori communications officer bred for service and submission. Finally his gaze found Una, and a human. He said with what sounded like genuine curiosity, "I have heard stories about your kind, but never had the pleasure of killing one. Stand down." Thresk commanded with authority in his voice. "You are outmatched, and station security will respond to our missed check-in within minutes." The Vrax leader laughed again. "Station security is busy with a fire on Deck 12, he said. "A fire?" "We started to keep them occupied." He gestured at his raiders. "We have time to enjoy ourselves." Kirith stepped forward with his forearms raised. "I will tear you apart with my bare hands," he snarled. "Will you?" the leader asked. "When was the last time you killed something without a weapon in your hands?" Kirith hesitated. The Vrax noticed, and his smile grew wider. "Your species evolved as predators, but you have not hunted in 1,000 generations," he said. "You rely on plasma rifles and energy shields to make you dangerous." He pointed at Thresk. "The Velthari are the same, and so are most apex species in this galaxy." He continued, "You have become soft and weak and dependent on technology. We are Vrax," he declared. "We remember what it means to hunt, and we remember what it means to kill with our own claws." The raiders began to spread out and surround the Petroliana. Watch them move with the coordination of a pack that had hunted together many times. Thresk and Kirith stood frozen in place. Their bodies were built for combat, but their instincts had atrophied over generations of civilized living without their weapons. They did not know what to do. Delin was shaking with terror, and her large black eyes were fixed on the approaching Vrax. Una felt her own fear, but something else rose up alongside it, something older and deeper than civilization. Humans had not been part of galactic society for long, and they had not forgotten their origins. Earth was a death world where everything tried to kill everything else. Humans had survived not by being the strongest or the fastest, but by being the most stubborn and the most willing to do whatever it took. Una reached down and drew her knife. The blade made a soft sound as it left the sheath. One of the Vrax noticed and pointed at her. "Look at this," he called out. "The human has a little blade." The others turned to look, and several of them laughed. "Does she think she can fight us with that?" another asked. The leader studied Una with renewed interest. "Perhaps she thinks herself a predator," he said. "How amusing." He gestured at the nearest raider. "Rack, show the human what a real predator looks like." The raider approached Una with a curved blade in his hand in confidence. In his stride he was twice her size and covered in natural armor. His teeth were designed to crush bone, and his claws could tear through metal. By every measure, he should have terrified her. But Una was not afraid. She was something else entirely. The raider raised his blade and prepared to strike. He expected her to flinch or beg or try to run. Instead, Una moved first. She did not wait for the attack. She did not give him time to use his size advantage. She exploded forward with speed that caught the Vrax completely off guard. Her knife found the gap in his armor where the neck met the shoulder. The blade sank deep and she twisted it before pulling it free. Raider collapsed without making a sound. Blood pooled beneath him in the red emergency light. The cargo bay went silent. Every Vrax stared at Una with expressions she had never seen on alien faces before. It took her a moment to recognize what she was seeing. They were confused. Prey was not supposed to attack. Prey was supposed to run or freeze or submit. Prey did not charge forward and kill before the predator could react. The leader's smile had vanished. He looked at his fallen raider and then back at Una. Stood over the body with blood dripping from her knife, and something in her eyes that he did not understand. It was not fear or desperation, or the madness of a cornered animal. It was focus. It was hunger. It was the look of a predator who had found her prey. "What are you?" he whispered. Yuna did not answer with words. She moved toward the next target, and the Vraks learned that they had made a terrible mistake. They had mocked her weapon. They should have feared the creature holding it. Yuna Park walked through the main corridor of Station Verth 9 with her bag over her shoulder and her orders in hand. The station was massive and filled with species from across the galaxy. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved past her without a second glance. Some were tall and covered in scales, while others were short and had 4 arms. Yuna had seen pictures during her training, but nothing prepared her for the reality of so many different beings in one place. She was here to join a mixed species patrol unit as part of the Galactic Coalition's security force. Humans had only been part of galactic society for 30 years, and they were still considered newcomers. Most species tolerated humans, but did not respect them. Yuna knew this, and she did not care. She had a job to do, and she intended to do it well. The security office was located on Deck 7, and Yuna found it without trouble. She stepped inside and saw 3 aliens waiting near a large table covered with weapons and equipment. The first was a Velthari named Commander Thresk, stood over 2 meters tall with green scales and yellow eyes that watched her with cold attention. The second was a Morvani called Sergeant Kirath, had 4 arms and thick armor plates covering his body like natural shields. The third was a small creature with gray skin and large black eyes. Yuna did not recognize the species commander. Thresk looked at a datapad in his clawed hand and then back at Yuna. "You are the human," he said in a flat voice. "Security Specialist Yuna Park reporting for duty," she answered. "I know who you are," Thresk said. "I requested a veteran officer, and they sent me a human instead." Yuna kept her face calm, even though his words stung. "I have 5 years of combat experience, sir." "Combat experience on Earth," Kirath said with a rumbling laugh. "Fighting other humans with primitive weapons." Yuna did not respond to the insult. She had expected this treatment, and losing her temper would only prove them right. Resk gestured toward the equipment table. "Collect your gear and prepare for inspection." Yuna moved to the table and began checking the standard items: energy pistol with 3 power cells, communication device scanner unit, medical kit, body armor rated for plasma burns. She put on the armor and attached the equipment to her belt. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out her personal item. It was a combat knife with a black handle and a blade as long as her forearm. She attached the sheath to her thigh and secured it in place. Sekirath noticed immediately. "What is that?" he asked while pointing with one of his 4 arms. "Combat knife," Yuna said. "I can see what it is," Kirath replied. "Why are you carrying a sharpened piece of metal when you have an energy weapon?" "Backup," Yuna said simply. "Backup." Kirath repeated the word like it was a joke. "Your backup plan is to stab someone if your pistol runs out of power. Energy weapons fail," Yuna said. "Cells drain and circuits break, but a blade only needs a steady hand." Kirath looked at Thresk and made a sound that Yuna recognized as laughter. "Humans truly are primitive," he said. "They carry ancient weapons because they do not trust real technology." Thresk studied Yuna with his cold yellow eyes. "The knife stays in its sheath unless I say otherwise," he ordered. "You will not embarrass this unit by waving around a piece of metal like a savage." "Understood, sir." Yuna said. The gray alien had been silent this whole time, but now spoke in a quiet voice. "I am Communications Officer Dellen," she said. "I look forward to working with you. At least one of them has manners," Yuna thought. "Thank you," she said out loud. Thresk began the mission briefing without further delay. "We have received reports of smugglers operating in Cargo Bay 17C on the lower decks," he explained. "Station security has confirmed unusual activity and suspects illegal weapons trading. How many hostiles? Kirith asked. Unknown, but likely no more than 5 or 6 based on the cargo. Volume. Thresk answered. This should be a simple sweep and arrest operation. Yuna raised her hand. What do we know about the smugglers? She asked. Species or affiliation? Thresk gave her a look that suggested he did not appreciate questions from humans. Unknown, he said. We will identify them when we find them. Sir, if they are organized criminals, they may have countermeasures prepared. Yuna said. Smugglers who use this station know the patrol routes and response times. Are you suggesting? We cannot handle a few criminals, Kirith asked with irritation in his voice. I'm suggesting we should be prepared for surprises. Unisade Thresk made a dismissive gesture with his clawed hand. Your concern is noted, but unnecessary, he said. My unit has handled dozens of these operations without incident. He turned to address the whole team. Formation will be standard sweep pattern with Kirith on point and Dellen monitoring communications from the center. He said, Parky will take rear. Guard position. Rear guard was the least important role in any patrol formation. Was where commanders put the people they did not trust. Yuna accepted the assignment without complaint. Arguing would change nothing, and she would prove herself through action, not words. The team left the security office and made their way to the lower decks. The station became darker and more industrial as they descended. The upper levels were clean and filled with diplomats and merchants, but down here everything was metal walls and flickering lights. Cargo Bay 17C was at the end of a long corridor lined with sealed doors. Each door led to a different storage area filled with goods waiting for transport. Thresk signaled for the team to stop near the entrance. Weapons ready, he ordered. Kirith, breach on my command. Everyone drew their energy pistols. Yuna noticed that her teammates held their weapons with confidence. The Velthari and Morvani had evolved as predators on their home worlds, and they carried themselves with the assurance of beings who had never known fear. But something felt wrong to Yunath. Corridor was too quiet, and there were no sounds coming from inside. The cargo bay smugglers made noise when they worked, and the silence suggested they knew someone was coming. Sir, Yuna said quietly, something is not right. Explain. Thresk demanded. No sound and no movement, Yuna said. Either the bay is empty or they are waiting for us. Kirith snorted. The human is scared of silence. I am not scared. Yuna said, I am cautious. Caution is for prey species, Kirith said. We are predators, and predators do not hesitate. Thresk seemed to consider Yuna's warning for a moment, but then shook his head. We proceed as planned, he said. Kirith breached now. Kirith moved forward and activated the door controls. The massive cargo bay doors slid open with a grinding sound. Inside was darkness. The main lights had been cut, and only emergency strips along the floor provided any visibility. Red shadows stretched between towers of shipping containers that rose toward the ceiling. Yuna's instincts screamed at her that this was a trap. Every part of her training told her to fall back and call for reinforcements, but she was rear guard, and rear guard followed orders. Team entered the cargo bay in formation with Kirith leading and Yuna at the back. Their footsteps echoed in the vast space. Dellen checked her scanner, but the device showed only static interference. She reported, Someone is jamming our equipment. Thresk raised his pistol and scanned the darkness ahead. Stay alert, he ordered. They are here somewhere. Yuna kept her hand near her knife. Energy pistol was ready, but something told her she would need the blade before this was over. The door behind them slammed shut with a thunderous crash. Then the lights went out completely, and Yuna heard laughter coming from the darkness all around them.